Okay, the survey itself, I'm not going to talk about this in great detail tonight. It's been out there. Let's go straight into the next slide. Just a couple of touch points I want to, I guess, hit on here. The survey itself, and those who are aware of it or may not be aware of it, it started actually way back in 2019, and then it all sort of got put on hold through COVID and so on. The project team, which was Michael Anderson, Chris Dyer, many of you will know Chris through his Model T and Model A associations, and myself, we were the three on that team. We kicked off pretty much in June 2022 to get the survey underway. In round terms, and our chief financial officer is at the back of the room and he'll tell me if I get this wrong, but it was basically a $55,000 project for a federation that didn't have a lot of money. But we bit the bullet and said, right, this is important to do it. It's important to do it right. So let's dig deep and see what we can achieve. So in the end, what we did is we funded basically what you see, the $55,000 there. We funded $42,000 of that from a whole group of what we call gold sponsors. In there was the Federation itself at $5,000, the VCC at $5,000, the NZHRA at $5,000, the MCA, Motorhome and Caravan Association at $5,000. Those three groups, all by the way, were contacted by phone call by myself. They all made the decision within 24 hours and with full support, which was great. There were a number of other private sponsors that we got on board. Some of them were in the form of clubs as well. That all added up to 42. We then went out to all of the clubs across New Zealand and said, look, this is what we're doing. We think it's important. We're close, but not quite there. As a club, would you like to dig in? Would you like to make a donation? Your call. Could be 50, could be whatever. And out of that, we got, in fact, 41 clubs who collectively put in the balance of the 55, which I think was $13,000 odd, 14 maybe, across 41 clubs. So that's how we got it together. We got it up and running. The point I want to make here in terms of all of the work that went into it, you've seen the final report. If you've gone online, you might have sifted through 150 pages of the full report. I just want to make the plug, and I don't need to do this, but I think it's, from a federation viewpoint, it's important that I share the story. We had the best research company in New Zealand do that job. If there's ever any discussion around your clubs or you hear it socially or whatever, you know, why did you use those guys? Someone else could have done it better or whatever. They are one of New Zealand's top-rated research companies. The owner of the company, Colin Yee, has been working in automotive research since 1989. And the guy, Duncan Stewart, who actually did all the hard yards, is not only one of New Zealand's highest accredited personal researchers in terms of his academic and experience qualities, but he's a petrol head. He and I would, and Michael Anderson, would be sitting with Duncan as we're talking about a particular survey or a sector of the survey we wanted to do, whether it was Hot Rod Association, custom and hot rods, or we might be talking about vintage motorcycles. Duncan had a knowledge of those sectors. He knew brands, he knew people who've got them, he had stories, he had petrol in his veins, so they did a great job. As you see there, 15,500 surveys. I've heard people say, well, hang on, Gary, you've got 140,000 members, why only 15,000? You cannot survey 140,000 people in any which way today. You won't get a different answer because 15,500 is more than statistically valid. And secondly, if you tried to survey 140,000 people, you'd go broke very quickly. And so all I want to say to you is assure you in terms of the background of the survey, totally statistically valid. And if you think about the fact that in that 15,500 and all those surveys that are in there, we covered 6 different sectors across, you know, whether it be historics, classic cars, vintage machinery, motorbikes, hot rod customs, etc. And we covered across a number of other groups like trades, private collections, museums. They all had different questionnaires. And each of those questionnaires, in some cases, had 50, or you all filled, many of you will have filled out the questions. You know how it went on and on and on. There were something like 50 or 55 questions on average in those surveys. Some were less, some were more. If you imagine that amount of data with that complexity on a spreadsheet, you wouldn't fit the spreadsheet in this room. And that's what Duncan did and managed to get to the conclusions that are in there. So that's me, I guess, just giving you an inside view of the survey itself and the depth. Preliminary results in September last year, we all saw those. Final report in February of 2024. And I'll leave it at that point. The key headlines in here, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every one of these one by one. The headlines, obviously, that caught the attention was the 16.5 billion economic footprint. Come back to that in a moment. Through the fact that we only drive 3,700 kilometres per year per vehicle on average, we confirmed, we're not a major contributor to carbon emissions. To me, wider than just the sector and the people in our sector, to me, two of the big conclusions that the survey gave us that we would never have had otherwise: 71% of the population at large in New Zealand support who we are as historic and classic vehicle owners, what we do as owners and as clubs, and the heritage that we represent. 71% of the population at large. And there was no lead into that question. There was nothing that shaped their thinking one way or another. That's a genuine number. Higher than, quite frankly, we thought it might be. And then in the other exercise that Duncan created, where he got them thinking about, if you could therefore have one of these vehicles, a classic or historic car, and he gave them options on 19 different cars, from a Model T to a whatever, a Jaguar or whatever, over the years and over the different model ranges and sectors. On average, 26% of the same New Zealanders said, yep, I would love to have that vehicle, whatever their vehicle of choice was, in my garage, if I could do it. If circumstances were right, I would love to have that vehicle. 26% is the average. On some vehicles, it was up as high as 45. On some vehicles, it was as low as 15. But nothing scored zero. And the average across all of those 19 vehicles was 26%. They'd love to have it in their garage. So the market's not dead yet. That's the point I will make out of that. Okay, the final report. That's the big report. It's online. It's on the Federation website. No one will have ever or wanted to download a hard copy. I've only done it so I can stand here and show you what 150 pages looks like. It is immensely full of detail. And it really backs up the whole effort that we collectively, across our clubs, have gone to. I talked a moment ago about the mechanics of pulling all of that together. I won't go back into that in more detail. The point I just do want to touch on is the 16.5 billion. Can you just go back to that earlier slide? That's the one on the top right there. I just want to make mention of that because no one's ever invented that number before. As Michael and I were sitting with Duncan and Colin Yee, the researchers, and they had all this data coming in, I was looking at it, I guess thinking about it, of how, as president, we were going to communicate this to ministers, the Mike Hoskings of this world, and so on. And I said, we need a number that grabs everyone's attention. And they said, well, how are you going to do that, Gary? Whatever. Because when you looked at the individual numbers, They're all over the place. You know, there's whatever it was. There's money in there that people spend on an annual basis on their car. There's money that that clubs spend and so on. But I wanted a figure that somehow grabbed everyone's attention. So we invented a new concept. I'm just telling you this now, so there's total honesty and transparency. This isn't GDP in the sense of a pure economic viewpoint. When you read about New Zealand's GDP is going up, going down, or whatever it is, that's sort of like the total level of transactions and everything else that's going on. And we've got that in there, but we've got more. We wanted to get to a number which actually said, in simple layperson terms, what do we as the historic and classic vehicle movement represent in this country? What's the dollar figure we actually account for? And so the researcher guy said, well, actually, how are you going to do this, Garry? Because we can't find an economist who can do this. I said, let's get creative. Let's take all the money that we all spend, not just within the Federation, but extrapolate across all historic and classic owners across New Zealand. We'll take all the money we spend on our vehicles in a year. So that's pretty clear. We take all the money that the public at large spend on going to museums and car shows, whatever, because we had that number. Let's take all the money that the tradespeople are paying their employees in terms of salaries and stuff as best we could get to that. The trade survey still needs a bit of next time round we'll have a bit more refinement to it, but we got an idea of what the salaries are across the trade sector. But then we went one stage further and we said, well, hang on a minute, that's just the money we spend on an average year basis. But we as a sector are more than that, because we've got this investment sitting in the garage or in the workshop or in the collection. And that's money we've got tied up in these vehicles, not spent somewhere else. So we added that in to get to what we call the total economic footprint that we have on the ground in the country. And that's where the 16.5 came from. So no one's queried it. No one's come back and said, Garry, where in the economic textbook do I find the definition of economic footprint? Because basically we created it. It's a legitimate number because we know the individual numbers are absolutely legitimate. We just added them together to say that's what we represent. So that's where that came from. I think that's probably all I'll cover on that right now. If there's other questions on the survey, happy to take them a bit later. We won't be far away now, another 5 minutes. Is that all right? Yep. I won't go past 9. All right? Promise? No. Okay. Well. Okay, do you want to get into something interesting? Should we talk about, next slide? Okay. This is where it gets tougher. In terms of the government, much of this you know, I won't go through this in great detail. We as a federation, I guess, coming into office, I guess, after the AGM of 2023, I stepped into the role after Harry in whatever that was, June or July of last year. We had the elections in September. So the first thing we did was get off the mark quickly, and we communicated as Federation directly with the preliminary survey results, the September results, with Simeon Brown, Matt Ducey. Matt Ducey is the Associate Minister of Transport, and with Paul Goldsmith, the Minister of Heritage. We then updated that communication with another round of communications with the final survey result, you know, when the 16.5 came out and so on. We did that all again with the same ministers, but this time we included Chris Luxon. You remember the photos of the Mini at, from memory, am I right, David? That was Pakuranga, wasn't it? Yeah. Britain Euro show at Pakuranga, where Chris Luxon declared that he's a classic and historic car fan. So he said, right, you're on our list. Got a lovely reply back from him, by the way, directly from the PM. to put them in the picture about the Federation, the updated numbers, 16.5 billion and so on. We also copied that note to David Seymour, who is the coalition leader, as you know, and Minister of Regulation, or in his words, I think, deregulation. He's occupied on other issues at the moment. Harry and David, I couldn't make it, met with Simeon Brown, Minister of Transport in Auckland on April the 17th, and we presented the warrant of fitness proposal from the Federation, brand new proposal. We basically ripped up all the stuff that we'd been talking about with the NZTA for the last 3 to 4 years, because they told us that would never fly. They weren't interested in it anymore. So we said, okay, park that up. Here's the new proposal, which was for 12-month warrants on all vehicles in New Zealand 40 years and older, and vehicles older than 1919, 0 warrants. We put into that a huge amount of work on analysis of the risk factor, particularly around crash statistics and fatality risk, fatality and serious injury, and warrant of fitness performance in terms of how those cars perform going through warrants today, across versus all other cars. So we put all of that proposal together. Harry and I presented that to the Director of Land Transport, Brent Alderton, and his deputy, Mike Hargraves, in late May. We got given an indication that they thought it was a serious proposal. They complimented us on the amount of detail, the amount of work we'd put into it, promised us an early response as best they could. Now, in fairness, NZTA have a few issues on their plates right now. We're not the only ones. And they promised us an early response maybe around August, September. We followed up with them in August to see whether or not they were on track. We got indicated then, no, they were running behind time. It would be late October. I then followed up with Mike Hargraves, who's the deputy director, who is the one making the decision. And he indicated to me that, I followed up with him on November the 1st, which is 10 days ago, and said, October 31 has come and passed. What's happening, Mike? And he came straight back to me and said, Gary, we're close. I will call you next Friday. That's Friday of last week. So, got the call. Expected to be here tonight and be able to share with you a decision. And what I've been told, and what the Federation, if you like, has been told, just not me personally, is that he has made his preliminary decision on that proposal. The preliminary decision is now being reviewed as it needs to be by, I guess, the other higher echelons or whatever it is within NZTA, and he will be back to me with the decision this week. So here I am on Monday night. I don't have a decision. I'm being absolutely honest and upfront and transparent with you. We'll get that decision sometime this week, and we'll communicate it when we get it. I don't know what it will be. I can't say this meeting's off the record because you can't control everything, and I mean, we're all free to tell whoever, but all I will say to you is that 3 or 4 months ago, we were pretty confident that we'd presented a pretty good case, and the feedback we got was, hey, you guys have done a great job. You've given us more data than we ever expected. You've answered a lot of our questions around whatever about the potential issues. But now I'm not quite so confident, is probably what I'll say to you. I won't try and pre-read what it's going to be. I suspect we might have some more work to do. Don't know. All I will say is that there's 2 things I guess I want to point out. What I guess we've come to understand, I personally have come to understand, Harry was probably a little further advanced than I was, is that the whole business culture of NZTA is risk averse. It is all about managing risk. And that's basically an outcome of an event that happened in 2019 where NZTA were taken to task by a coroner. That coroner's report got a whole lot of attention in the media. It resulted in massive changes within the NZTA leadership group, but both the directors, the chair, and senior management. And it led to some changes within cabinet, Jacinda Ardern's cabinet, because this coroner's report basically said NZTA had failed in their duty to manage risk that had resulted in a particular fatality in some form of workplace accident involving a vehicle. So where I understand it is this attitude of risk aversion is now paramount within the NZTA. Now, we still believe our data showed there is no risk. We compared the accident and the fatality and serious injury accidents of vehicles 40 years and older, whether they be a classic or historic car or a darned daily driver that someone's still driving, because they're all in that sector, 40 years and older. The fatality and serious injury risk in that sector over the last 20 years is infinitesimal. 2 or 3 accidents, or whatever the number was, it was of that scale in that 20-year period, compared to whatever goes on in all the other sectors. We analysed the warrant of fitness data, and you're not going to believe this, but the pass rate on first check for a 40-year-old plus vehicle in the warrant of fitness testing is it's equal to vehicles that are in 10 years and younger, and 3 of those years are no warrants. And the warrant of fitness failure rate in those 40-year and older vehicles is twice as low, whatever the right words are, than vehicles which are 10 to 20 years or 20 to 30 or 30 to 40. So there is no risk from a warrant of fitness risk viewpoint. In our view, the data shows it. There's no risk from a fatality and serious injury viewpoint. The data showed it. But still, I'm worried they're being risk averse. So I won't say any more, but we're just going to live with it for another 3 or 4 days and see what comes out. That's where we're at on that. I think that probably covers everything I can cover on that. There is Plan B, the 40-year warrant thing. We called internally Plan A. We didn't call it Plan A at the time, but when we started getting a bit nervous, I called it Plan A, because we then started, a couple of us, brainstorming Plan B. All I can say is, if Plan A doesn't work, Bruce, David, right, we're going to go for Plan B, whatever that looks like. We'll see how that works out. Okay, let's just now go to the future of the Federation. Last couple of slides, guys, and seriously, we're out of this. Okay, very quickly, the first 2 slides. Won't go through all of this in detail. Out of our workshop back in November last year, new executive came in June, July of last year. I came in as president. Bruce at that stage had not joined us. He joined us this year. But David and I and the balance of the executive got together in a hotel in Wellington for 2 days at my request, really, to say, right, it's time to start thinking about the future. Let's start working on it. We signed up after lots of discussion and brainstorming and workshops and goodness knows what, to the vision, which you see there. I'll send this out and you can, Karen can help send it out to everybody as well. So the vision is straightforward. The mission is straightforward. We used this in the AGM last year as well. Coming out of that, on the next slide, we came out with strategic objectives that we want to pursue. This is like big picture stuff we want to do. No rocket science in here. We need to increase the revenue and funding coming into the Federation, because right at the moment we're actually going backwards, or treading water is probably a better word. We want to protect and celebrate our heritage. Interestingly, that was on the agenda way back in 1994, and there's not a lot been done about that. We want to be an effective voice with government to the best we can be. We want to enhance trade skills and training, talked about that before. We want to plan and implement an affordable federation structure, including succession planning, and we want to share, publicise, and leverage the results of the survey. Okay, all of that's big picture words. The next slide is the important one. Right now, if you talk to me over coffee and you say, well, actually, Garry, that's all very interesting. What's the federation actually working on? In the volunteer group that we are, because that's all we are, we meet by Zoom every sort of 4 to 5 weeks. We've all got other day jobs and pressures and priorities, whatever. But as a volunteer group, and I guess I take the responsibility of trying to make all this come together and help make it happen, these are the actual specific work plans that, quite frankly, I'm signed up to. And through the team, hopefully we will make progress on between now and I'll say the end of next year. So I'm talking about the balance of the current financial year, or the AGM year through to the AGM in June, and then in the 6 months or so beyond that. So this is not all going to happen overnight. But here's what we want to do. Some of this was in the a note that went out earlier, I think, to all clubs. We want to grow the revenue, and I mentioned this a moment ago, across our clubs today. So all cards on the table. There's going to be a proposal come to you before the AGM next year, which is probably going to bump up your membership fee of the federation a little bit. I won't put a number on it, but manageable level, fingers crossed. I mean, it's got to be manageable to be sensible, to lift the revenue across our club. We've got some clubs. I saw one today that is, I don't know, only obviously a small club, but their membership fee to the federation is $26 a year. Now, what do you buy for 26 bucks? I think we've got to get real. If we're going to do some of the stuff we need clubs across their membership, relative to size and whatever, to sort of come to the party. And again, there'll be more talk on this, and there'll be more thinking and more two-way discussion, but I need to signal it. The second thing we need to do at the same time is get more clubs on board into the federation. We've lost 2 or 3 that I'm aware of, I think, over the last 3 to 4 months. I think now, what is it, David? We've picked up 5 or 6 in the last sort of 3 to 4 months. And there's more in the wings, so that we're working on. I've delegated to each of the executive, I want you to bring 3 new clubs into the federation by the end of this current year, June of next year. So we're working, and if you can help on that, if you've got fellow clubs out there that you think, God, they should be part of the federation, then you don't have to go and do the hard yards on them. Just let us know, and we'll take the lead on that. The third piece that we're working on, and it's linked, these 2 next dot points are actually linked, and Bruce is taking a lead on helping to do this. How many of you in this room are members of in your other interests, of the MCA, Motorhome and Caravan? Quite a few. Many of you will know how well the MCA model works in terms of, as a member of the MCA, whatever your annual sub is, the discounts you get, whether it's on fuel or Picton ferries, whatever, very quickly put your membership fee that you sign up with as an individual into perspective, because you get these great benefits when you fill the tank, book a Cook Strait ferry or whatever. Am I correct? Yeah. It works pretty well. The piece I'm not sure is that the way that deal is set up, many of those companies, I can't say all of them, provide, over and above the discount they give to you as the member, provide a kickback to the head office of the MCA, which runs their head office structure. And that's the model we're wanting to try and duplicate. All cards on the table. Different companies, but that's the approach we want to take. We want to get to a point to help grow more clubs joining up, to help hold on to the membership you've got in your existing clubs. If we came out to you with a membership deal for your members on fuel, I'm making this up as I stand here, fuel is certainly one we're talking with, accommodation, travel, whether that's ferries or whatever, restaurants, who knows what else. If we could put that deal together with 4 or 5 big name national suppliers, where you as a member of XYZ car club, get your card, which gets you whatever that discount is, but at the same time, it kicks a little rebate back into the federation. It takes the pressure off clubs having to pay membership fees at a higher rate, and it drives money for us to put back into next time we do the survey or whatever the case may be. We are working pretty hard on that, right, Bruce? But we've got a step that we need to take, which I'm going to come to, which is actually beyond what we can do, and I need your help on. I'll come to that in a moment. But that's one of the things we're working on. The other idea that, all honesty, I floated with the executive, thinking outside the square to bring in some money and bring in some new thinking. Over and above the clubs and the traditional structure of the AGM, and you elect the executive, and that's how we run. What if we had an outside group of, for want of a better word, associate partners who aren't members of the association, of the federation, but who are a think tank that maybe David and I can use 3 or 4 times a year, and like a Zoom meeting, to brainstorm new ideas. And those associate partners might pay $1,000 a year for the privilege of being an associate partner, but they get the input to put ideas on the table, whether it's about new style of events we've never run, or sponsorship ideas, or other benefits, or what's going on in the world of trade training. And I won't name names of the companies we're talking, but we're talking about people who've got their roots and their blood in classic and historic cars, but they can't get their thinking through to us through a club structure. But if they had a Zoom call with the vice president and myself every 4 months, and they could put ideas on the table and we could brainstorm where it might take us all, I think I know already 5 or 6 or more people who would sign up for that. So we're kicking it around. We've got to think about how it fits in the Constitution. We've got to do all of, but it's to letting you know, I guess, if nothing else, there's some ideas starting to germinate, which are outside the square, to try and take us forward and bring fresh thinking in.